Hello, everybody. I am Alexa Tinsley. I am the Director of Programs here at Jett Foundation. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our webinar on insurance, adaptive vehicles. Very, very broad, but also very important topic. So I want to thank you for joining us. I am going to give everybody a minute to hop on. So while we are doing so, if you are able to put your name and where you are located in the chat, comfortable doing so, please do so, and we will be back in just another minute. Excuse me. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I am Alexa Tinsley. I am the Director of Programs here at Jett Foundation. I want to thank you again for watching our webinar on the Road Together, sharing lived experience and insurance tips for adaptive vehicles in Duchenne. We have Lori Watkins here, who is an insurance agent, but also a Duchenne mom. So she'll share a little bit more about herself in a little bit, but just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so if for any reason you are not able to watch it live, or if you wanted to share it with someone who you know could use it and wasn't able to be here, we will have that recording available for you in the next few days to share. There is also closed captioning at the bottom of the screen. There's a CC button. Excuse me. You can use you can either do I think a full transcript or live closed captioning if you would like that. We also do have, I just realized I didn't press record, but we're going to keep going anyway. We do also have a Q&A box at the bottom, so we will be doing Q&As at after, and that's primarily where we go to look for questions. We will try to monitor the chat, and Lori will be monitoring it as well to try to get those questions from there as well. I am going to go ahead and start the recording. Oh, it is recording. Look at that. Automatically. Look, someone set it up and I didn't even know it the right way. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Lori.
Well, thanks, Alexa. Just so you know, if anybody replied in the chat with where they are and who they are, I can't see that, so I don't know that I can monitor chat. I don't know that I can see it. But hi, everybody. If I know you, hi. If I don't know you, I don't know why. So, thanks to Jessica Campbell for following my Facebook and our journey on the van, I guess, because she got me roped into this, but I don't mind. I try to share whatever I know, and if I can help, I'm great. I love to help. Um, so I'm Lori Watkins. I'm a State Farm agent of about 10 years. My son is Joseph, but he goes by Seth. Many of you might know who Seth is. He just turned 24 years old. He is getting a master's degree at Liberty University and living on campus. So if you have any questions about that, I'm a great source for that as well. We hope one day he would like to, he wants to teach college. When he gets done with his master's, he'll probably start out at the high school level and then move on. That's going to come up in the presentation as well. And I live in South Central Virginia, about 30 minutes away from Seth. So just so you know, the majority of this information is going to be what I have experienced in us trying to get him an accessible van to drive in the state of Virginia. I am sure to some level you will be able to use that in the state that you're at. But I will also preface every bit of this by saying I have learned that this process is not for the faint of heart. We live in the bottom of the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, I guess. And I say often to anybody I'm complaining to that I feel like the state is pulling the Blue Ridge Mountains behind them as they're trying to get this process going. So Alexa, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll get started. So what we're going to talk about really is the who, what, why. or who, what, when. And we know the why, right? Our boys want independence, or our young men want independence. And the where is where you are. So I didn't even include that. And remember, every state will be different. So I'm going to start by talking about the overall process. The process will change, or no, won't change. I'm going to go into detail about each step. The first step is through your um, we call it the Department of Aging and Rehab here in Virginia. It might be whatever your social services organization is. I will tell you, I'm a former special ed teacher, and I know that when I was a teacher, as well as for my son, when he was in ninth grade, the state sends out, and this was in Louisiana and now in Virginia, it happened in both states. The state sends out a social service worker who is supposed to meet with every student of every disability. Now, my son has no cognitive disabilities, and what they are working for is, uh, or their stated purpose, I guess, is for helping those with cognitive issues find jobs, find work placement, that type of thing. But they also can help with funding for college, help with starting the process for a car, all that kind of stuff. So my son, didn't want to meet with them until I just like, you are going to meet with them. This is ridiculous. This isn't just about jobs. This is about every aspect of your life being a disabled person. So make sure that you are talking to your high school or you're talking to your student about meeting with that group, because that is the group that can get you keyed into this. So when Seth turned 17 in the state of Virginia, he did the academic part of driver's ed. He obviously couldn't do the driving part. He took his driver's ed test, and he the the written part, he passed it. So then we're waiting for driver's ed. Well, I'm assuming everywhere, but in the state of Virginia, they told us we will pay for education or we will pay for transportation. And really, what they didn't say is transportation to a job. So, um, and they will pay for a junior college for the first couple of years, just to make sure that your student can handle the academics of college. And then your junior and senior year, they would pay for a 4-year college. So we did a 4-year college the whole time. So they didn't help us the first 2 years, but junior and senior year, they paid the majority of our expenses, which was great. Um, so once Seth got to graduating from college, which was last May, so about a year ago now, I guess his last semester. So this would have been late fall, Thanksgiving, Christmas time of 2024. We went to we call them DARS, our Department of Aging and Rehab, and we said, okay, you're done paying with college. You're going to pay for one more semester. So now it's time to start working on transportation, because we know this is going to take a while. He can't get a job unless he has a car to even go to interviews, because I work full time. So, we got to figure this out. And so they started the process. Well, we got the first round of funding. That really is just for an evaluation to see, can your child handle the joystick? Can your child drive? And he passed that with flying colors. Then, just a little out of whack. I'm sorry. Number 2 should have been, Alexa, is this the updated one I sent you, or is this the first one? Anyway, state funding 2 is really getting the funding for driver's education. For Virginia, that took us forever. Then you do the driver's education, you actually take the driving test, and then we are in the state funding part 3 now. State funding part 3 is where they're saying, okay, he's passed driver's ed, he's got his driver's license. State, here is the request for the 150,000 in modifications to a vehicle. So that's huge. Then once that approved, kind of simultaneously, we will buy the van, and they go through a company bid process to modify the van. Then it goes, once that's approved, it goes to installation. And then you have more driver's ed that's called learning your van. I call it learning your van. How do you drive your specific van? So let's talk first, though, about what goes into that first state funding. So, Alexa, if we can go to the next slide.
I'm just actually going to check to make sure this is the right one. So I'm going
Yeah,
to,
that's it. I didn't
okay,
change any
perfect.
slide order. There was just some minor things in there. No big deal.
Gotcha. Okay.
So these are documents that they most likely will request from you. They made me provide an insurance quote. And they made me provide an insurance quote that covers 150,000 in modifications, because that's about what the high-end modifications run now. That includes the ramp, that includes the joystick and all the controls that go with that. So when you go to your insurance company, you need to tell them that it is 100, approximately whatever dollar figure your state tells you, in modifications, so that that is insured. I hear a lot of parents online who are saying, oh, my insurance didn't go up, my insurance this, my insurance that. I will tell you, obviously, I quoted myself. And if you have State Farm insurance and you aren't sure your agent is doing it right, call me. I can do it for you. There's a couple things you want to make sure of that. Obviously, if this car is in a wreck, you want it all covered. You don't want to have to come out of pocket for that, because the state's not going to pay for it again. So you got to make sure that all of it's covered. For State Farm, I we will be getting a new 20, where are we in the year? 2026 Toyota Sienna. We'll talk about the types of vehicles in a minute, but the Toyota Sienna is what we chose. And I did not add my son as a youthful driver. So if you know anything about insurance, adding a youthful driver is a lot. To insure that vehicle with the 150,000 in mods is going to be about $350 a month. I told my son if he ever says a crossword to me again in his life, he might die. I'll just sell the van. So just joking, but seriously, that's a lot of money. The other thing that we were required to do was to get a medical report from his doctor, saying that, yeah, I don't see any reason that he can not drive. This was a 14-page document they had to fill out, so that took a little bit of time. And then the DMV comes back and says, okay, we need another report from the doctor. Now, this is later in the process, and it has to be within 6 months of taking his final driver's ed test. So for us, we were supposed to take our driver's ed test in December, right after our final driver's ed training, and realized that we were 2 days out of that 6 months. So we had to, find a doctor. Well, thankfully, thank God, his doctor was like, oh, we leave an opening on Friday mornings for this emergency. So they got us in like really quick, did the updated report, and then we went in January to actually take his part of his driver's ed test, and he successfully passed. So he has a driver's license. Other things that they are going to, oh, and by the way, that report, most DMVs require that to be updated at least every year. It might have to be updated every 6 months, depending on your state. Hopefully not, but possibly. They require bank statements from us, and they also required a valid either loan approval or validation from your bank that you can purchase. You will be approved for a loan, or you have the cash in the bank to buy a new vehicle. So those are that's the paperwork that was ultimately requested of me, more than one time. That's another story. So next slide, please. So as I said, Alexa, yeah. As I said, the first thing we did is we went up for an evaluation. Now, when I say we went up, you have to figure out where is that high-tech vehicle that they can drive. For us, the closest one was in Washington, D.C., or a suburb. So we had to drive about 3 hours. That included a hotel room, that kind of thing, for them to. Well, I think the evaluation was just a couple hours. So we drove up and came back. It was a long day, but we did it. And they put them in a van, strap them in, give them basic information, and off they go. Typically, they do not start out with the parent in the car because they want the kid to get comfortable without being nervous. And then he did really well. So they threw me in the van and said, "Hey, you want to ride with him?" So I rode with him, took a little video, that type of thing. Um, so you need to figure out where that high-tech vehicle is. Where in your state is going to do that? Now, I will, if there's anybody in Virginia or in the surrounding areas, um, I'll just tell you the name of it that we're using is the Driving Rehab Center of Excellence in Chantilly, Virginia. Obviously, that is not who everybody's going to use. But if you're in maybe South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, somewhere like that, they very likely could use the DRCE. So, um, when you get, so I'm gonna kind of hang out on this slide for just a second. When you get the past that evaluation, a report has to go back to DARS, to that group that's kind of managing everything, and they are the ones that I guess have the Blue Ridge Mountains strapped to their back. I don't know what their problem is, but anyway, so so all the reports and everything are funneled through them, and then they have to send off for approval. Once they get that report and they have all the other stuff that they need, they are going to submit. Well, in Virginia, what they do is they submit a report to the commissioner of the Department of Rehab, that says, "Hey, they're looking for this funding," and it's for really approval for the main driver's ed. So whoever your organization is, not only might it be different than another state, I have found, because a friend of ours in near Newport, Virginia, they are about the same process as us in the same place. And she may be on here, I don't know. But anyway, they also are working through DARS, and their DARS coordinator requires different things than our DARS coordinator does. Who knows why? It's the same state. Couldn't tell you. Um, so for us, we were just told, go up, do driver's ed. When your person says you're good, go take the test. For her and my friend in Newport, they said he has to do 30 hours of driver's ed. We didn't have to do that. We just did, whatever we had. So, but that approval to get the funding for driver's ed, I was told, um, they are going to basically be asking for everything. So after you get the driver's ed and we're going for the big funding is what I call it, it won't take near as long. This took us from March, this funding to get to the point of going to do the driver's ed, from March after he passed that evaluation to um, November, because we wanted to do it when he was on school break. Obviously, that makes sense. Well, we were able to do the first week of training during Thanksgiving break. And then we went back at the end of, well, it was right after Christmas. Just you have to work schedules out. Just right after Christmas, before New Year's, well, no, that's not true. It was the middle of December for his second. And then, like I said, we were supposed to get his driver's license at the end of that, on December 19th, but we found out on December 18th that 6-month report the DMV requires ran out on the 18th. So we had to go on the 19th, got in with our doctor at Duke real quick, had that done real quick, and got the report. I'd sent them the report ahead of time. They had it all filled out. They just had to sign off on it after they put their eyes on him, and got that sent back up. And then we went in January, and got his driver's license. So keep in mind your rehabilitative department could have different requirements. The other thing that rehab department, we found this out in the process, is they want your your child to have a very pretty definitive career path. So the rehab department, my son's major is in history. The rehab department decided my son, well, when he went to college, he thought he was going to go into history and then he was going to go to law school. Well, he decided he doesn't like school enough to do law school. So he decided, nope, I'm just going to be a history major and I'll figure out what I'm going to do. So they decided he was going to teach. Well, he didn't, at that point, he didn't want to teach, honestly. It was like, we never said he was going to teach. And they're like, well, you need to go and you need to go student teach on your breaks from college to master's. You need to go student teach when you can. And I looked at him, I said, okay, how are y'all going to get him there? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I work full time. How, without a car, how are you going to get him there? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, he has no way to get there. I said, and the other thing they do is they help adapt their work environment for work. And I said, so are you going to call the school ahead of time where he's going in for one day and tell him to rearrange a classroom for him to go in one day so he can student teach? I said, this makes no sense. I used to be a teacher. I said, if I'm a teacher in a classroom, I set it up the way I want. But as a substitute teacher, not student, I'm sorry, as a substitute teacher, are you going to go in and rearrange that teacher's classroom for him to go in for one day to substitute teach? I said, that's impractical. It ain't going to happen. I said, and depending on the classroom setup, he ain't going to be able to get behind the desk. He ain't going to be able to access the computer. They looked at me like I had three heads when I'm bringing up practical issues. So anyway, so I sell insurance. His father sells insurance in Louisiana. His sister sells insurance. He works for me on breaks. Guess what? He's going to sell insurance as far as they know. And that is not to change until after the car is in our possession. He is going to sell insurance. So, he came in he was just on spring break. He came in and worked so we can give him a pay stub that he worked. So that is another thing you need to think about, and the consistency, because what happens is the Department of Rehab is given all this money from the state, and then they are followed for 2 years. And if you don't work consistently for 2 years, they lose all that money. So they really want to follow that. And to change careers, they have to go in or to even state that you're changing a career, they have to go in and change all the paperwork and all the stuff. And when you have people that tie the Blue Ridge Mountains to their back and they try to pull them, that delays everything even more. Okay, next slide. So I may have already covered this. So we have the funding for the evaluation, then we have the funding for the driver's ed. Like I said, that took 6 to 7 months with all the paperwork because it is a complex modification request. And keep in mind, it is likely that your Department of Rehab where you live has never had a complex vehicle. And that is our case. They have never had a complex vehicle that they needed to get the funding for. It just is frustrating as it just takes a while. Go to the next slide. So, like I said, the funding for that, once we got our driver, he got his driver's license. The funding for the van is supposed to be quicker. He got his license in December. I'll give him grace over the holidays, middle of January, something like that. And we are still waiting. And April 1st is next week, and I can't get anybody to tell me. So once it is signed off on, it'll go for a bid. I will tell you, in that funding that took so long, I finally got my congressman involved. He wrote a letter to the commissioner of this specific department, and it was amazing how things just clicked right along then. And I'm probably about to get him involved again. And sadly, the commissioner is a different new commissioner, and so that's annoying. But anyway, I'm sorry that. See if I can fix that. Our state, what is at the bottom of there? Our state requires 3 bids in order to, for them to know who's going to be the most reasonable to get it fitted, that $150,000. I have found out while we're waiting in this 3 months that there are not 3 companies in the state of Virginia right now that even have technicians that can do it. There's only one. So thankfully, that will reduce, hopefully, our bid time once we get to that process, but we are not there yet. So if we can go to the next slide. So what are they looking for in the van? Your van cannot be any more than 3 years old. It can have no more than 50,000 miles on it. I get it. They're dumping all that money into that van. They don't want one that's going to fall apart. If you're getting a lift installed into the van, so you're not buying one that has a lift in it, you can expect 4 to 6 weeks, obviously, depending on Braun's. If there's any delay, well, whatever vendor you use, but I use Braun. We're using Braun, and then 8 to 12 weeks for the modifications to be installed. So I did find out, and we will be buying a vehicle that already has the lift in it. We pay for the chassis of the vehicle without the lift, and then our Department of Rehab will reimburse the dealership or whoever it is the cost that is associated with that lift. So hopefully saving us 4 to 6 weeks. That's the goal. So, and like I said, our timeline to date is 15 months and, going on 16, and we don't have word. Now, I have had a long, serious conversation with really the only reasonable person who'll give me answers. I say that cautiously, sorry. And she firmly believes, based on her experience in the process, that we are where we are in the process, that we will have the van by late July, early August, in time for him to go back to school, which is the goal. We want him to be in an apartment instead of a dorm. I mean, let's be real. What 24-year-old man wants to live in a dorm with a bunch of freshmen? So, and that's a whole nother issue, trying to find an apartment he can live in. He can live at home, but I want him to have that independence. So anyway, so what type of van were we told? Forever you heard Dodge Caravan. Well, did you know? I didn't. Dodge is not making the Caravan anymore. I didn't know that. So the only options we were given was the Toyota Sienna, we're a Toyota family, or a Chrysler Pacifica. Those were the only options we were given for a handicapped accessible van. I asked them, can you do this to a truck, or can you do this to an SUV? Because you see all of that out there. And they were like, not with all the high-tech components that he needs. So just be aware that that is possibly going to be your answer as well. But those right now, I don't imagine they would have not given me other options. Those are the only options for vehicles. So, okay. I'm kind of flying through this. Other things to consider. We can go to the next slide. We were driving down the road the other day, and Seth asked me, he said, "Mom, how do I pump gas?" And I said, I have a good friend that I'll tell you about his story, but I have a good friend who is a quadriplegic and drives an accessible vehicle. And I asked him that, and he said, well, normally, I have one of my kids follow me in their cars, or, my wife will go with me or whatever. He goes, but I also have the phone numbers of all the gas stations I frequent in my phone. And as long as there's somebody to man the store, ADA rule, there's a note. If you'll notice, there's a note on the pillars by the gas stations. If you need ADA assistance, call us at this number. So you can call them and they will help. And I guess, you'll develop a relationship with them and how to get gas. And it's like I told my son, I said, if you're on a road trip, you go to a busy gas station. You don't go to one in the middle of nowhere, because typically they're going to have more than one employee working inside the store at a off an interstate or something like that. Otherwise, they're going to know you, and they're going to be there to help you. So a wreck, obviously a very scary proposition. So and this will scare all of you the way it scared me. My friend who told me about the gas, he had driven for 23 years as a quad and never had a wreck, never got a speeding ticket. Um, he himself was an insurance agent. He himself insured his own vehicle and knew that it was done correctly. And he was driving down the road and a car pulled out from a stop sign, um, hit him broadside towards the front of the vehicle. Airbags did not go off. And I will just say this about airbags. If you don't know this, and it's just a good thing to know and a good thing to tell your kids if they start driving, when an airbag goes off, the powder looks like smoke in the car. It does not mean your car is on fire. And it's very scary because you think your car's on fire. Well, my friend's name is Sam. When Sam was in this wreck, um, the uh, the wreck threw his hands off the joystick. Couldn't lift his hand back up. It's easy when it's sitting on the arm of your chair to move your hand just a little bit, but when it fell to the ground, he couldn't get his arm back up. The car, and neither do yours. And I'm trying to remember if his airbags went off. Maybe his airbags did go off, but still, the car did not stop. His van did not stop. It rolled towards a house and was about to run into the house. And it rolled over. He's in Louisiana, and there was a big oak tree. So it was going, something made the van steer away towards the oak tree. Well, it actually rolled over a root first that steered it away from the oak tree and away from the house, thank God. And the second set of roots or whatever, I think finally stopped the car. So Sam was not knocked out, not unconscious. And he did have like 4 or 5 broken ribs. I mean, it was not good. The ambulance got there. He had to tell them how to get him released from the vehicle. They put his arm back on the joystick. He had to back himself out. Thankfully, the ramp wasn't damaged. He had to back himself out, and then they were able to get him out of the wheelchair into onto a gurney into the hospital. The person who hit him, and this sadly hopefully this is a one-off, but it could be your situation. The person that hit him was an Uber driver and had just turned his Uber app on, thank God, because he had minimum state limits in Louisiana, which is $15,000. And so he ended up with Progressive's limits because he was driving Uber, and he literally at the stop sign that he pulled out from, he turned his Uber app on. So Progressive sends a letter to Sam and says, "What in the world are you doing driving your vehicle? You shouldn't be driving a vehicle. We're not covering anything." Well, I said to Sam, and he said back to me, talk to the state of Louisiana because they gave me a driver's license 22 years ago and have never revoked it. So he went through his insurance. Now, you remember I told you he wrote his own policy. He knows what he insured. They offered him, the van's totaled. They offered him just a regular van. And he said, "What about," and his modifications are different than ours, or they were older. "What about the 60,000 in modifications?" And they were like, "Well, what are you talking about? What do you mean?" They didn't even notice it. So he was fighting that battle the last time I talked to him. I did find out recently that some ambulances are able to carry wheelchairs in them. I didn't know that. But you do have to request a special ambulance, and that doesn't mean that an ambulance in your area is going to have that capability. As you know, tow trucks will not. There might be someone on here who has been part of the Duchenne community for a really long time, like me, and you will recall, time flies. 5, 6, 7 years ago, Dana Edwards started a Facebook page for where do you live and do you have a vehicle that you could help someone if a car breaks down and we need to transport a wheelchair or someone in a wheelchair if somebody needs help. I went to Dana. Dana spent hours on Facebook trying to find that Facebook page. And for the life of me, she couldn't find it. So if any of you find it, share it loud and proud because there is a Facebook page out there with a bunch of Duchenne parents from every state who has said, I have a wheelchair van. If you're near me and you need this assistance, call me. Here's my phone number. And I am sorry I don't have that to give to you. I couldn't find it. Dana couldn't find it. Maybe we need to recreate it. But it was a brilliant idea. Dana has a lot of them all the time. But it was a brilliant idea to help if we got stuck on the road with a wheelchair. So Sam's story tells me a lot of things. Number one, um, you got to make sure, when I say make sure it's insured correctly, not only monetarily, I, when we get our van, I will provide a detailed list of every accessibility option and the vendor for that within the policy. That way, if it's there at the beginning, your insurance company can't say we didn't know about it. Because of the extreme cost, it's going to be expensive, not only for your insurance company or hopefully the insurance company of the person that hit you, but that it's going to be much easier to get your insurance company to pay for it than it would be the other company. Now, I will tell you, if somebody else is at fault, they are responsible for putting you in a similar vehicle, meaning they up to the liability limits of the person that hit you. They are responsible for paying for you to be in a handicapped accessible van. Now, obviously, it ain't going to be one that your child can drive, but at least if you don't have one to drive, it is one that they can drive. So, or that you can drive to get them around so that they aren't stranded. The other thing, there was something else that just popped in my head that I didn't put on here that I was going to tell you, and I don't remember. Has any questions come through, Alexa? Are there any questions that I can try to answer for you?
No questions yet. No. I think the only thing that I would add is for like the tow truck piece, like the wheelchair accessible Ubers. But that's also not in every area, especially rural areas.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if that's something that would be reimbursed by insurance or not, so that's not putting my hands up on
Probably,
that one, but
probably not.
right.
Probably not.
But if like in
I
an emergency situation, if that is available, that's an option.
The other thing I had done when I was preparing the slideshow, and it didn't give me, obviously, because I'm looking nationwide, go out to AI somewhere and just, or start, if you're going, it's probably a good idea for all of us if we have a wheelchair bound family member, call around to tow companies and say, do you have a way to tow a wheelchair? Or, how could we get, because they're not going to put it on the back of a tow truck. That's too much liability for them. Um, but go ahead and start looking for in your area companies that could provide that service. There are medical assistance companies that, will come and pick you up and take you to your doctor's appointments. Maybe possibly you could hire one of them for a few minutes to get you from point A to point B. But again, I don't think in Medicaid might reimburse that. But I haven't gone down that road, so I haven't had to do that. I will tell you for our van, this is what I was going to say. I am keeping our old van that I drive. And the reason I am keeping that is one, I had a friend in Mississippi who got an accessible vehicle to drive. And if any of you are in Mississippi and want to talk to them through their process, I'll let you know who that is. But something was wrong with their van, and they sold the old one that the parents drove, and their son needed emergency medical care. And so luckily their dad is pretty handy, and that kind of forced him in about 30 minutes. He got outside and Jimmy rigged or fixed. I don't know what he did, but he got the van working so that they could get their son to the doctor. However, when you get a van, another choice that you need to make is they can put the driver of the van, meaning your wheelchair bound family member, either in the traditional driver's seat or on the passenger side. So you get to choose. Do you want a left-handed joystick or a right-handed joystick? So if you do the regular driver's side, which is what my son wants to do, I can still drive that van. However, I've got to put the driver's seat in. We had thought about um, just taking the passenger seat and throwing it on the driver's seat. So if we go on a road trip and he wants to drive most of it, but he gets tired, we could can't do that. The passenger seats are not the same as the driver's seat in any van, evidently. So you have to carry the driver's seat with you. That's a pain. But then you have to install the seat, which y'all, for most people, I do it in my van. I can take the seat in and out. And I'm a I'm an old woman. I'm older than I want to be. And it takes me 10 or 15 minutes. And then if the latches decide to fight me, it takes a little bit longer, and that's annoying to me. And then there's some knob or something where you turn the controls so that it becomes a regular driving car again, not a joystick driving car. Um, I don't want to have to wait that 20 minutes to get him in a vehicle if there's a medical emergency. I know in a lot of areas you're going to call 911. In my area, it's going to take 30, 45 minutes for an ambulance to get to us. So it is much quicker to throw him in my car and get there. And so I'm going to keep the older van just because I'm going to take probably off all the coverages, and I'm just going to keep it in case we need it. Also, if you decide to put what I've been told, if you decide to put it on the passenger side, the driver's now going to be on the passenger. Think a postman's vehicle, right? Or you're in England. You've still got the steering wheel on the driver's side. So even though they're using that joystick, the steering wheel's just still going. That's the weirdest looking thing. And if you were sitting as a passenger behind that steering wheel and you've got those pedals down at your feet and your kid's driving, they said, Lori, if you ever grab the steering wheel, it will break your hands. So you've got to learn, I don't know, put a night mask on, because sit on your hands. I don't know. For me, I could see me doing all sorts of stupid things. So that's another thing that you need to consider. So, Jessica, that was a great thought. Yeah, talk to your local fire and rescue resources to see if I'm stuck, can they help? And see what options they give you, because they might have options. There are enough people in this world in wheelchairs that surely there's got to be a good solution to this. Maybe we should all make our millions and build the company that does it. I don't know. But anyway. So that's kind of our story. It has been a long, lengthy story. I will tell you, our rehab people are now afraid of me, because when he says, okay, I think it's going to be done by today, then, or in 3 days, I wait about 5 or 6 days and I email him, hey, did you get it done? No. And then he'll say, oh, I need this document, this document. I can't tell you how many times I've sent the same document to these people over and over and over. And I've gotten to the point that I'm just like, I have given this to you. There is no reason you're asking for this for me again. And I'm just not even nice anymore. I am so frustrated. And, there will be a huge complaint once that van is in my possession. And it is at that point that we'll say, oh, by the way, he's going to be a teacher. So change whatever it is you want to change. So, because he has decided that his calling is teaching and he's going to do that. So anyway, just know that it's not for the faint of heart. I did find out a week and a half ago there is a 5-page document that my rehab person is following, because remember, he's never done it before. And I'm like, why couldn't I have a copy of that document, at least, to give me kind of the sequence of events so that I could make sure I've got all my documents in order. And I know why, because they don't want me to hold them accountable, but I do that anyway. Um, I would say if you go down this road, keep every email, keep every question you have and their responses or lack thereof, and just know it's going to be worth it in the end. I 100% believe it, but it's hard to get there. We are really, I mean, like I said, we started probably in November of 2024. And we'll be lucky to have the van we're hoping, I'm gonna put it out there, we will have the van by the end of July of 2026. Any other questions or any questions? And y'all can reach out to me, Facebook Messenger, call me, I don't care. I'll share with you whatever I know.
Yeah, no, I think this has been really great. I think that, accessible vehicles in general are just the cost is crazy, the process is crazy. So going into it kind of, as much as eyes wide open, like I said to you earlier, is just so important, and knowing what you're getting yourself into. I think, with when you go to buy a vehicle that isn't converted, right? Like you can go to the dealership and you can get it same day. I'm sure that that is an option in some cases, right? But the reality is the majority of it takes time, and it's not, it's not a same day deal typically. So,
And Alexa, let me say one other thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
no,
What the state tells us, all in, when I buy, between me buying the van and all costs associated, it's $250,000 vehicle. And um, do not go buy a van, because evidently you have to have a very specific VIN that can be modified. So don't just go out and say, okay, I've bought the van and you're just going to modify this van. Don't do that. You have to get them to approve the certain VIN.
wild. I think the only other thing I would add is doing your research in terms of where you're buying a van from. There's, a lot of different companies that sell accessible vehicles throughout the country, and just making sure you're doing your research when choosing those vehicles. Um, I don't see any questions, but Lori has her information here. And if you are watching the recording and have any questions for Lori, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you're more comfortable going through me to get to Lori, please let me know as well. You can email me at alexa@jetfoundation.org. Lori, I want to thank you again so much for being so honest and open about this topic. It's something that you know, we talk about, especially with our accessible vehicle fund, right? We talk about every day, and like insurance pieces. And I'm really glad you talked about the cost of that, because I don't think people sometimes realize. And, when we're looking at transits too, that increases the cost of insurance also for, families that have more than one child with Duchenne. So thank you for opening up about that.
Jessica just put another comment in here about making sure your chair will fit. When we got lucky, I guess, because I really wanted a Toyota. I wanted I'm getting the high end because he can talk to the car instead of having to worry about a phone and all of that. So yeah, it's added cost, but that was important to me. And they were saying, oh, you can't get the Toyota. The floor is too low in the Toyota for him. And I'm like, well, he can elevate his chair. He's got an elevator on his chair. She's like, mm-mm. Throws off center of gravity, makes the chair way too unsafe in a car. I was like, oh, crap. Okay. So they said, luckily, there was a gal there who was getting a Toyota outfitted, and we were able to drive up in that, found that it worked fine. But you're 100% right, Jessica. You got to make sure not only that your chair will fit, but that the floor is the right height for being able to see out that windshield effectively.
Absolutely. And even if you're not planning on driving it, we've had situations where the height of the vehicle has been too low for individuals in their chairs. We found where it's not wide enough. So even if you're not driving it, that's still a concern that, you should be considering when looking at accessible.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, everybody who is on. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody who watches the recording, thank you. Again, this will be recorded, so please feel free to share. And Lori, again, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing your experiences and your knowledge. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Happy
All
to help
right.
anyone.
Awesome. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Was that what you were hoping?
Yeah, thank you so much. You did a great job.